He sat in his luxurious chair, smirking smugly. He had just fired the janitor, yet another insignificant pawn in his world of power. But an hour later, her name appeared in the corporate chat. And what happened next turned out to be the worst day of his life. But let's start from the very beginning. Emma Walker had been working as a janitor at Harrison Group for several years. Every day, her morning started earlier than everyone else's. While the entire office was still asleep, she would enter the building through the side door, change into comfortable sneakers, and pick up a bucket of water. By 6 in the morning, as the city was just waking up, she was already wiping down the glass doors of the main hall, sweeping the long corridors, cleaning up yesterday's coffee spills from the conference tables, and scrubbing muddy footprints off the marble floor. The work was monotonous, but Emma took it seriously. In the evenings, when the last employees left the office, she would go through the floors again, collecting trash bags, replacing paper towels in the restrooms, and checking if anyone had left half-eaten lunches on their desks. She was invisible. Most office workers didn't notice her. They walked past, glued to their phone screens, chatting about projects, bonuses, and upcoming vacations. If anyone did acknowledge her presence, it was only to give a dismissive nod or to drop an empty cup on the table instead of carrying it to the kitchen. But the worst of them all was Robert Harper, the head of the marketing department. He was the embodiment of corporate arrogance. Always impeccably dressed, sporting expensive watches and a perfectly ironed shirt, he looked down on everyone, especially those in insignificant positions. To him, the janitor was nothing more than background noise, a necessary inconvenience, nothing more. One morning, while Emma was wiping down tables in the conference room, she overheard Robert loudly complaining to his colleagues by the coffee machine. "Honestly, they can't even hire a decent janitor. Someone left a rag in the corridor yesterday. I nearly ruined my shoes. Pathetic, really." Some employees chuckled. Others nodded in agreement. No one objected. Emma pretended not to hear. She was used to these kinds of conversations. It wasn't news to her. People like Robert didn't see the ones who made their lives comfortable. But a few minutes later, the office silence was broken by a loud announcement over the intercom. "Emma Walker, please report to the head of the marketing department's office." Emma tensed. She had never been called into a manager's office before. When she entered, Robert was sitting in his chair, leaning back casually, arms crossed over his chest. There wasn't a hint of respect in his gaze, just indifference and boredom. "You're fired." Emma blinked, trying to process what she had just heard. "Excuse me. What?" "You're fired," he repeated, slightly irritated. "But why?" she asked, frowning. Robert sighed, as if explaining the obvious was a chore. "Yesterday, I nearly tripped over your bucket," he said with disdain. "In this company, we value professionalism, not stupidity." He leaned forward, tapping his fingers on the desk. "You do realize your job is basic, don't you? Just don't leave your bucket in the middle of the corridor, that's all. But if you can't even handle that, why are you here?" Emma felt indignation bubbling inside her, but on the outside, she remained calm. "I understand," she said quietly. "Good." Robert nodded in satisfaction. "You may go." Emma turned and walked out of the office. All she could hear behind her was the quiet chuckling of employees eager to gossip about what had just happened. She no longer worked at Harrison Group, and none of them had the slightest idea who she really was. Emma walked out of the office in silence, feeling the mocking gazes of her co-workers on her back. "Took her long enough to leave," someone scoffed behind her. "A bucket. Seriously?" The receptionist giggled quietly. Her heart was pounding. A bitter sense of injustice rose inside her. How unfair. She had worked here for years, Yet the moment someone with a more important position decided, she was tossed aside like a piece of garbage. But Emma didn't argue. She untied the strings of her uniform, took off her work apron, and neatly folded it on a chair in the locker room. Goodbye to the rags, buckets, and soap she had used to keep this office spotless while others built their careers here, looking down on her with contempt. She walked out of the building slowly, leaving behind a chapter of her life that should have ended long ago. But no one knew that everything was about to change. Meanwhile, Robert Harper returned to his work with a smug smile, feeling deeply satisfied. Another insignificant problem dealt with. "Finally," he muttered, opening his laptop. A colleague peeked into his office. "Good call, Rob. She really overstayed her welcome." "Exactly." He smirked, clicking on an ad for their latest project. "This is a serious company, not a charity." Within minutes, the incident was already forgotten. But then, strange things started happening in the office. At first, it was just whispers in the hallways. "Did you hear? This has to be a joke. Wait, Emma?" One by one, employees started looking up from their screens, exchanging glances filled with growing shock. Robert frowned as he noticed a colleague staring at his phone, his expression utterly stunned. "Damn! Have you seen this?" "Seen what?" Robert grumbled, irritated. But as he opened the company's internal chat, his breath caught. Right there, in the official company channel, marked as an important announcement, was a message from the CEO. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am stepping out of the shadows and officially resuming leadership. Starting today, major changes are coming to our company. Signed, Emma Walker, President and owner of Harrison Group." A dead silence fell over the office. Robert froze, staring at the screen in disbelief. For a second, everything around him stopped, like the entire office had been sucked into a vacuum of silence. His fingers clenched around his mouse, his palms suddenly clammy. "No! This can't be real!" But the screen didn't lie. Emma Walker, President and owner. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead. Everyone in the office was already looking at him, some with amused smirks, others openly enjoying his downfall. He had just fired his own boss. Robert froze. No. This had to be a mistake. He couldn't even process what he was reading. The words on the screen blurred before his eyes. He blinked once, twice, but the text remained unchanged. Emma Walker, President and owner of Harrison Group. What the hell? A crushing wave of panic squeezed his chest. His temples pounded. Frantically, he scrolled down the chat, desperately hoping this was some kind of prank. Maybe someone hacked the account? Maybe this was a stupid joke. But all he saw were his colleagues exchanging knowing glances and smirks. They already knew. Some were barely holding back laughter. Others were openly enjoying the spectacle. He had just humiliated his own boss. He had just fired the owner of the company. The office door swung open. Tension thickened in the air. Emma Walker stepped inside, walking across the carpet like it was a runway. But this was no longer the woman who spent her days scrubbing floors. A sharp black suit, high heels, a calm yet ice-cold gaze. There was no trace of the janitor left. She approached his desk, the same desk where his unprofessionalism complaint had just been sitting. Robert Harper. She said his name slowly, clearly, like delivering a final sentence. The room grew unbearably hot. Robert felt a cold sweat creeping down his back. "I have always believed in ordinary people," she continued, tilting her head slightly. "That's why I worked undercover, to see how my company treats those at the bottom." She paused. "And today, you showed me everything I needed to see." His stomach twisted. "Listen, Miss Walker," he stammered, swallowing hard. This is just a misunderstanding. I didn't know. Exactly. Emma leaned in, her piercing gaze locking onto his. You didn't know. A deliberate silence followed. But your true nature came through. Robert couldn't breathe. He knew this was the end. Emma straightened, looking down at him. You're fired. The office fell into absolute silence. So silent they could hear the faint clink of a fallen stylus somewhere in the distance. Robert couldn't move. He had lost, and from the looks of it, he wouldn't even get a chance to fix his mistake. Robert's face turned pale. He opened his mouth, trying to say something, but the words got stuck in his throat. His entire body felt numb, his fingers trembled, and cold sweat dripped down his back. He still couldn't believe what was happening. But the employees could. The silence shattered into thunderous applause. Someone whistled. Someone laughed in relief. They had endured his arrogance for years, his smug comments, his fake superiority. They despised his habit of forcing weekend work, his condescending remarks, his constant accusations of lack of initiative. But he had been the boss. No one could stand up to him. Until today. Now he stood there, completely destroyed by a single sentence. Karma had struck instantly. Pack your things. Emma's voice was calm, clear, but firm. Security will escort you out. Robert swallowed hard, feeling dozens of eyes on him. He couldn't believe it. A security guard in a dark uniform was already standing by the door, ready to walk him out. Was this real? Was this actually happening? Just this morning, he was the boss, the tyrant of the department, the man everyone feared and obeyed. And now, he was nothing. He walked out of the office under roaring applause. Now that's a plot twist, someone whispered. He got exactly what he deserved. Robert didn't look back. Every step echoed in his ears. The hallway stretched endlessly before him. Employees turned away, but their smirks were obvious. No one shook his hand. No one wished him luck. They had been waiting for this day. He reached the doors, and the moment they shut behind him, the office erupted in cheers. As for Emma, she allowed herself the faintest smile. Then she turned and calmly walked toward her office. Her new office. Today, justice had been served.